This is a word for anyone who has ever been disappointed, because this passage here may not have been written to you, but if you have ever known disappointment in your life, you will get this, what's being said. If you've ever wondered, what is God doing, then you will totally get this story. Now, Joseph had been brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the guard, an Egyptian, had bought him from the Ishmaelites who had brought him down there. The Lord was with Joseph, and he became a successful man, and he was in the house of his Egyptian master. His master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord caused all he did to succeed in his hands. So Joseph found favor in his sight and attended him, and he made him overseer of his house and put him in charge of all that he had. From the time that he made him an overseer in his house and over all that he had, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake. The blessing, the Lord was on all that he had, in house and field. So he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and because of him, he had no concern about anything but the food he ate. Now, Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. After a time, his master's wife cast her eyes on Joseph and said, "Lie with me." And as he spoke to Joseph day after day, he would not listen to her, to lie beside her, or to be with her. But one day, when he went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the house were there in the house, she caught him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand and fled and got out of the house. And as soon as she saw that he had left his garment in her hand and had fled out of the house, she called the men of her household and said to them, "See, he has brought among us a Hebrew to laugh at us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And as soon as he heard that I lifted up my voice and cried out, he left his garment beside me and fled and got out of the house." Now she's going to do something really curious right here. Watch this little detail. Then she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. Do you get that? Yeah, she's about to spring the trap even further. And she told him the same story, saying, "The Hebrew servant whom you have brought among us came in to me to laugh at me. But as soon as I lifted up my voice and cried, he left his garment beside me and fled out of the house." As soon as his master heard the words that his wife spoke to him, "This is the way that your servant treated me," his anger was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. And he was there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison put Joseph in charge of all the prisoners who were in the prison. Whatever was done there, he was the one who did it. The keeper of the prison paid no attention to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him. And whatever he did, the Lord made it succeed. Let me tell you what this story is not about. This story is not about how to avoid sexual temptation. That's not what this story is about. But if you've been in a Sunday school class of any description, that's what people usually make this about. Now I've never understood this, and I think that this would be a very challenging, especially if you're a Sunday school illustrator, that this would be a very challenging kind of lesson to talk about, because the one thing that we know about is the one thing you can't draw, right? So that is the challenge in this passage, because we're looking at this idea of blessings in disguise. That's what our current series is on. Because so often we think that blessings, and the world around us especially, reinforces the idea that blessings only occur on sunny days, right? That it's only when things are going well. It's only when you receive that promotion, and then you do the hashtag blessings thing that I've mocked so many times, right? And it works well, it preaches real well, because that is what the world thinks that blessings are. And yet when you look in this passage, here's just a real quick idea of where we're going with this. If you look at the beginning of this passage, you see that God is with Joseph when he's in the field, right? And then when he's in jail, God is with him. This is why I named this sermon, God Goes to Jail. Because God goes to jail with Joseph here in this story. And we see that really that God is with Joseph at all times, because God is committed to bless his people at all times. So just the three scenes that we see here in this passage are, we see God blessing and being with Joseph when Joseph is in the field, when Joseph is in danger, and when Joseph is in jail. Those are just the three big ideas that we see. In the first 6 verses, we see Joseph is in the field. God is with him. That's what verse 2 says, that God is with him. And then in verse 4, it says that God gives him favor. Pretty simple. God chooses to bless Potiphar because of Joseph. Now, that's an additional, if you're looking for the word of blessing, you'll find that in verse 5. That's where the blessing of God is upon Potiphar because of Joseph. But this blessing will be tested at the second half of verse 6, when Joseph is in danger. And it's important that you know, that you see here in this passage, what does it say about Joseph? It says that he's an attractive guy. Now, there's a lot of ways that you can construe this, but just take it this way, that he simply looked a lot like his mom. We read that Rachel was very attractive as far as a woman, so he got mom's looks, and so he was fair in form and figure to look at. So that's what we have here. It says that Joseph was handsome in his form and his appearance. And so this becomes a problem, though. This blessing starts to become a challenge in his life. Potiphar's wife, she notices the thing that everyone else notices about Joseph. And she continually propositions Joseph, come, lie with me, come, be with me. And he continually resists, to the point that she realizes she is not getting anywhere, she is not getting any traction, so she's going to have to trick him. She tells all the male servants to be out of the house, because she knows that Joseph is going to be faithful. He's going to come in and he's going to do his job. He's going to do his duties. And it is at that point that she grabs his garment. That is a key word in this passage. Have you noticed that garments seem to get Joseph in trouble? We saw it two weeks ago, right? The garment of many colors, that got him in trouble. When it's stripped off of him, he goes into the pit. When this garment is stripped off of him, he'll end up in jail, right? That is on purpose. That is how Moses is shaping the story. He's letting you know that this is a pattern. And so the segue is simply this, that God's blessings, they come to a crashing halt, right? Wrong. God's blessings do not come to a crashing halt and a screeching halt just because he goes to jail. I think that you can figure the way a lot of us in the kingdom of God look at people who are in prison, by the way. I think that there's this, we place this baggage on people, and we almost say, God can't work in a jail. Our friend Randy Jackson would say otherwise, right? He would say that most times that is exactly the place where God is working out and where his blessings can be found in the way that really captures people's attention the most. In this astounding surprise to the story, we see that God is with Joseph when he is in jail, when he's in that bad place, the place where good boys and good girls don't go. Because we were all told in school that if you're a good boy or a good girl, you'll study hard, you'll go to college, you'll get that job, you'll get that spouse, 2.5 kids and the dog with white picket fence and all that kind of thing. And then that's where God's blessings will be on your life, right? If you do all those things, then you will follow that path. That is the world's path to blessing. Let me ask a question. Is that how life really works out? I know a lot of people who work very hard, who are very smart, who have not advanced nearly as far as some other people who were just in the right place at the right time. And some of them who manipulate the system really well, right? That is the truth, the reality of what life is. And if you need more assurance of that, go to Psalm chapter 73. It talks all about how the wicked are prospering and how the righteous are taking it on the chin. And the psalmist is saying, God, he's saying much like Joseph was probably doing when he gets sent to the prison. He says, God, what are you doing? I'm doing everything that you told me to do. And he says, but then I went to your temple, and then I saw you, and I saw that this is a trap for the unrighteous, that they have received all these good things, and yet they have not turned to you. And that is actually the indictment on them. But here in this passage, what we see is that Potiphar, he receives this report, and he is angry, right? Verse 19 tells us the last few words. He says, his anger was kindled. Question, at whom does it say? I think that's an intentional deletion. It's not telling you who Potiphar his anger is kindled at. I submit to you, it's his wife. And so what Potiphar is about to do is he's going to pull a very shrewd move, because he does not become the captain of the guard for no reason. There's actually two reasons he becomes the captain of the guard. One is because he's shrewd, and also the phrase in Hebrew, guard, it can mean one of two things. It can mean a guard like we think of a prison guard. It can also be used for the word butcher. So a guard was looked in one of two ways. They were either one who protects or one who executes, right? Here in this passage, the key question is, will Joseph be butchered by the butcher? That's on the literary level, that's what's going on. That's the question we should be asking. And the answer is that he places Joseph in jail to protect him. To protect him from his wife. In fact, he places him in a certain kind of jail. Did you notice it? It's the jail where the king's prisoners are kept. In other words, he's not kept in the really bad jail. He's kept in the royal jail. And if you go on further, in chapter 40, verse 3, we read that there are two other people in next week's passage. We're going to see two people go to this jail. And we read about some of the details of this jail. The prison cell was actually on Potiphar's property. That seems kind of weird, doesn't it? To have a prison in your backyard. Probably he has an estate, but that is part of what's going on here. And what we see is that God has placed Joseph in this royal prison so he can make connections that he would never have been able to make back in the land of Canaan, right? If everything had gone right, if he hadn't been thrown into the pit, would he have ever met someone of the importance of Pharaoh's royal court? No, there's no way at all. But this is all part of God's design, of God's providence, taking him into the pit, taking him into slavery in the field, taking him even into the depths of the prison. And it is there that we see in verse 21 that God is with Joseph in jail. Verse 21, we read, but the Lord was with Joseph. The Lord was with Joseph and showed him steadfast love. That's a big Hebrew term that is this when you read in the 23rd Psalm, surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life. The goodness and mercy word is the same word here for steadfast love. He shows steadfast love, that kind of love, that kind of Psalm 23 kind of love, that kind of grace, that kind of favor. In fact, he gives him favor again. We saw favor in verse 4. Now we see it in verse 22. that he has favor in the eyes of the guy who's in charge of the prison, of the warden. And we see this principle that God is with you wherever you go. We don't just find this here. If you go to Joshua chapter 1, verse 9, what does God say to Joshua? He says, be strong and courageous. He says, all that stuff, do not be terrified, do not be discouraged. Why? For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. What does he say in the Great Commission verses in Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20? He says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Translation, I am the king of the universe. Satan does not run this place anymore. I run it. Therefore, do what I say. What am I going to tell you to do? Make disciples. Then he tells you how. And then at the very end, he says, why? For lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. And speaking of the end of the age, will you turn with me to Revelation? Let's go to the end. Let's go to this is the ultimate spoiler alert. You're going to go to the end of the book, chapter 21, verses 3 and 4. If I can get back from the book of maps here. Okay, 21:3 says this. This talks about the end of time and God's presence with us. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. Well, how is that any different from what I'm experiencing right now, right? Since you've told me, Bill, that God is with me wherever I go, how is it different? Verse 4, he will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things has passed away. See, what we're seeing here is that God's presence is a promise. It is a promise of even greater things that are to come. Can I get an amen from somebody? I mean, this is fantastic news. That everything that troubles you this week, gone. Everything that you're worried about and anxious about, it will be no more. Everything bad that has ever happened to you, it will be as if it is unhappened. That is the promise that we find at the end. And as we go back to the beginning here in Genesis, we see what God is doing. We see that he is connecting Joseph with Pharaoh's royal court because he's about to bring a great deliverance. But that's in the future weeks, right? What does this have to do with us right now, Bill? Well, let me tell you what he's doing in us right now. Let me tell you in a story. Once upon a time, there was an African missionary who served in tribal Africa. And as she was about to head home back to her home soil, she had spent time faithfully, and all the people that knew her and come to know her had brought her these various gifts. And there was this one man who brought to her a shell, and it was rather unremarkable in and of itself. There wasn't something very beautiful about it. But what was known by this missionary is that shell was not indigenous to that area. That man who brought that gift to her had to travel days and even weeks to get there to that riverbed and to walk back and to bring her that gift. And she said, that's amazing. How did you get it? And he said, this is the gift. The journey is the gift. What he was saying in effect to this missionary is, I love you this far. I will journey this far. I will go through these dangers. I will go through hunger there and back for you. That's what he was saying in their language, because the journey is the gift. when it comes to our service to God, the journey is the gift. God is not looking at the results as much as he is as the faithfulness of Joseph. You see, the time that Joseph is in prison is just as precious in God's sight as when that great deliverance comes. When he is the second in charge in the command of Egypt, that faithfulness in slavery in prison, it was just as valuable to God. Now, how does that apply to us? When you think that your service to God is not remarkable, it's like that shell. It's not remarkable. God doesn't care. That's not what he's looking at. He's looking at the journey, guys. He's looking at every sacrifice that you make, every step that you are taking. You're taking towards God. And the good news is that God is with you. So don't focus on what others see. Don't focus on any kind of metrics of those sort. Focus on the fact that you get to be with God. God, what are you doing? Why am I in this prison? It doesn't matter. God is with you. Enjoy him here in the prison, Joseph. Be faithful to him wherever you go, because that's what God really cares about. He is with you in the field, in danger, in jail. God is with you. And here's the part I love. He is also for you. God is with you and he is for you. God's presence, that's the blessing.